First off, welcome to the UVA Entertainment Club of Los Angeles' April speaking event with Jessica Lamour. My name is Maggie Chopade, and I'm on staff for the UVA Clubs and Global Engagement. I have just a couple very quick housekeeping items for you before we get started on the program. While we, as I mentioned earlier, we welcome anyone who'd like to share their videos. We all love to see your faces. I'm sure Jessica and Julia would love to see your faces as well as they speak, so they don't think that they're necessarily alone. But we do ask that you please mute your computers and make sure you're on mute. So that way there's not a lot of background noise that it's going to be interfering. And you can do that on the left-hand corner with the little slash if you're unfamiliar. We'll also have a time for Q&A near the end of this event. So please feel free, we're gonna do that a couple different ways. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat, or you can actually also raise your hand during that portion, which should be under the reactions. If it's not, it means you have an older version of Zoom and you'd go into participants. But it's usually under reactions. You can raise your hand and you can actually just say hello in your own voice and ask your question if you would prefer that. One last little tidbit is just so you know that this event will be recorded so that we can share this on our website for future viewing. So with that, thank you again for joining us. And without further ado, Julia Monahan, 2014 McIntyre School of Commerce graduate and a board member for UVA ELA and a writer's assistant that's currently working in Los Angeles. She'll be opening up our evening with an introduction of our speaker. Julia?
Hi, everyone. First, I just want to thank Jessica for being here and for generously giving her time to UVA alumni and just for being a part of our April speaker series. So thank you, Jessica.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited.
I'll start off with Jessica's bio. So Jessica is a Haitian-American graduate of the University of Virginia from 2009, and she's a former Moody's financial research analyst. While working at Moody's, she found her love of writing, taking classes at New York University School of Continued Education and Upright Citizens Brigade. Jessica eventually moved to LA, where she worked for years as an assistant in writers' rooms for Burning Love, Mason Twins, Marry Me, Imaginary Mary, and eventually landing a writer-producer role on Living Biblically, SMILF, Little Voice, Chicago Party Ant, and now currently writing on the Clone High reboot. Jessica is currently nominated for the 52nd NAACP Image Awards for Outstanding Writing Drama Series for Little Voice. Welcome, Jessica.
Hi, guys. Thank you all for joining.
We're all wildly cheering for you.
Thank you.
So I'll just start off with some fun questions. What has kept you sane during this past quarantine period?
Let's see, what's kept me sane? I think just like going on walks, because I started to get like claustrophobic at home. Like treating myself every once in a while to get takeout, which feels like you're going out to eat in a way. Yeah, going on drives was a big thing. I would just like drive up to Malibu and just like hang out by the beach. But yeah, those, and FaceTiming a lot with friends. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like all of those same have been my coping methods too. Do you have any takeout recommendations for any of us based in LA?
I love John and Vinny's. It feels like East Coast Italian. What else? I think my boyfriend and I did like a pizza challenge where we tried almost every pizza place in LA, where we did like Prime Pizza, John and Vinny's Pizza, just like almost every pizza place, that was fun. Yeah.
That seems like time well spent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then also, do you have a favorite movie or TV show at the moment that's helped keep you sane during quarantine?
I really loved watching I May Destroy You during quarantine. I love Search Party, so they had a new season come out during quarantine. What else was I watching? I mean, a lot of reality TV. That's like my love. What else have I watched? Insecure, I like. Big Mouth. Yeah, just a bunch of comedy and dramedy. Some dramas. I watched what was the one with Nicole Kidman That one was great too.
Oh, The Undoing, that
The
drama.
Undoing. Yeah, The Undoing.
Yes.
Yeah. And Your Honor was really good. Those were fun because it made like something to do every Sunday. Like, oh my God, there's a new episode out. Yeah.
Yeah, it felt like the return to the old type of appointment TV where you would watch
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, great. So now that we have some people chiming in the chat. Oh, Todd wants to know what was the favorite pizza place, like what took the cake in your testing.
Ooh, there's this one place on 3rd Street called Oste, and they do like Roman style pizza. So it's like thicker and it just feels so fresh. It's really good. Or I really liked Prince Street Pizza, which is on Sunset, and that is they have one in New York City. So it felt like, oh my God, I'm having real New York pizza. So those two are like probably my favorite.
I'm sure everyone's frantic.
Yeah.
Notes.
I know, yeah.
Amazing, cool. Well, so now that we know a little bit about you, maybe we can start at the beginning and just hear about your path. So what did you want to be when you were growing up?
Growing up, I mean, I come from immigrant parents. So growing up, I was drilled in that I was going to be like a lawyer and do like international law. So like going into UVA, I was pre-law. So that was, and I did some like summer programs as a high school student that were sort of like on the pre-law track. And the summer of my second year, I wound up doing like a pre-law summer program where you like did a mock trial and you took some like torts classes. And after that, I was like, this is not for me. I don't want to do this. And then I was majoring in economics and I was like, oh, I'll just continue on this path. And I guess I'll go into like finance in some degree. Yeah. And I was drilled that I had to have like a practical major. I think at one point I wanted to major in religious studies and they were like, no, because what are you going to do with that after? No offense to anyone that majored in religious studies, but yeah. So yeah, I guess, I mean, I wanted to do stuff in the arts because I also danced and I was like, maybe I'll be on Broadway one day, but my mom put the kibosh on that and was like, no, you got to do something practical. So yeah.
I mean, there's still time for Broadway. You never know. So
I know. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
When you were growing up, what led to you deciding to go to UVA for undergrad?
It's so interesting because I applied to UVA and I'd never visited. It wasn't my first time being at UVA was orientation, but I was between UVA and I think Johns Hopkins because my brother went there. And he was like, do not go there unless you want to be pre-med, don't go. And my guidance counselor was also like, don't do it. You'd love UVA. And I spoke to an alum that went to UVA and he was like, it's such a great atmosphere and the campus is so beautiful. And finally I was like, all right, I'll go to UVA. And I never visited, but and so my first time there was orientation. So
wow.
Yeah.
At my orientation, there was this huge small tornado thunderstorm, so we lost power. And I remember being in the dark in Hereford dorms, just like, okay, so this is college.
Right, yeah.
But
yeah.
So while you were at UVA, and you were navigating the whole law school, not law school decision, was there a class or a professor that was influential as you were figuring out what you wanted to be?
Let's think. I mean, I guess because I was in the economics class and I was also an Eccles scholar, so I could make my own major, and I wound up doing like, I don't remember, but I took this commerce class, which was taught by, I forgot his name, but like anyone could take it in the comm school. And I just really liked that one because it was so interesting. And I really liked the education classes. I took like the multicultural education and I wound up being like the TA type of person in that when you can do it. But that was really fun because it was just, you're just exposed to all different students from, there are no prerequisites for it. So you're just around all different students and all different grades, and you're just learning about how just we're all different and communicating to people. And I think at the end of the day, that sort of helped along the journey. But if I'm being completely honest, there wasn't a particular class that I took while at UVA that was like, oh my God, this is solidifying the deal for me to be a writer. I took some drama classes like my first year, and I sort of started to get into the news. I took some news writing classes, and I was doing like the radio for a little bit my first year. So I think I was sort of on the path of doing that, but then I like veered to economics and was sort of just doing that. But yeah, I was like dabbling in some of the media stuff. So,
Yeah, it sounds like you really took like a wide sampling of classes. That's really cool.
yeah. Yeah.
So if during your time at UVA, you didn't know you wanted to be a writer, when did that click into place? Like when did you decide television writing was your career?
Yeah, so after UVA, when I graduated, I moved back to New York and I got a job as a financial research analyst at Moody's Investor Service. And I thought, this is going to be my career path as finance. And I think I eventually realized that I did not like it. And it just wasn't, I don't know, it just wasn't my cup of tea, like the culture and, the day-to-day work of it all. And I just remember being sort of sad every day, just being like, no, this can't be work every day. I hate this. Mm-hmm. And I sort of got into writing, oddly enough. I was finally like reading, like leisure reading, because, in college, everything is just like reading for school. But I was reading the Chelsea Handler books and I was just like, oh my God, this is so funny, like laughing on the train. And then I was like, I can write short stories about my life and the crazy things that I've done when I was like little and stuff. And like during free time at work, I would be on my computer, like writing short stories. And I like was like, oh, if I, get it, I put it into a packet. And as I was like, if I can just like submit it to Chelsea Handler, then maybe I can write on her late night show. And I sort of went through a phase where I was like almost stalking her, where I was like going to like her stand-up performances and waiting outside with like this packet of short stories about my life. And I was like, if I could just give this to her. And at one point I was like friends with her driver, and I went to like a book signing that Chewy did at like a Borders that was like shutting down. And I was like, I just got to get this packet of short stories to her. Eventually I dropped it and I was like, oh, well, maybe I can turn the short stories into sketches. And then that's when I got into taking writing classes. So I took like the UCB sketch writing class and NYU TV writing class. And those were in like the School of Continuing Education at NYU. So I took those after work. And that's when I was like, wow, I really like this. And my class was taught by this guy named Jim Mendrinos. He was like a stand-up and had written or done punch-up on stuff. And I did like a 30 Rock sample and I was like, oh, I love this so much. And that sort of began the journey. Yeah.
Cool. So are there any specific takeaways from those classes, whether from the UCB classes or the NYU classes, that you feel like you still use to this day in the writers' rooms you're working in?
I mean, I still have like the notebook of all the notes I took, especially from the NYU class, because that was more TV writing, since that's what I am doing now. But just like the structure of it all, I'll look back and sort of when you're breaking story, like just dialogue and joke, just like the structure of it all, which was like so much what I learned in those classes. I will go back to that sometimes and just think of like, all right, I need to go back to the basics and boil it all down, like when I'm writing my own stuff. So yeah, it's definitely been helpful for sure.
That's amazing that you still have a notebook of it.
Yeah.
That notebook will be worth millions.
Yeah.
So once you had spent a few years in New York, you moved to LA, and you worked as a writer's assistant. Can you talk about finding those jobs and what you learned working as a writer's assistant?
So going back to my time in New York when I was still working in finance, I was reaching out to different people, and my brother had a friend whose friend was a writer on Late Night with Jimmy Fallon. So I met with him and he was sort of like my mentor. And I had sent my 30 Rocks back to a different competitions and I was like a finalist in one of them. It was like the Scriptapalooza competition. And he was like, oh, this is so awesome. Like, I know a group of girls that are writing a web series. They're NYU actresses and they just need a writer. And it'll be great practice for you to like turn your, going from the page to screen, which is like a great practice, and just creating your own and sort of being like a showrunner in a way.
Yeah.
So I met with these girls and we like instantly clicked, and we had the same sense of humor. And we wrote in New York, I wrote the first season of this web series, Downtown Girls. And, through that, I was like, oh, I really want to be a professional writer. And at the time, my brother moved to LA. So I was like, oh, this is great. I've got family there. I can stay with him. So I eventually moved out to LA, and I used LinkedIn a lot to find work. I was reaching out to a bunch of people, and I was also using the UVA alumni, like the alumni network connection. And I was just like, as soon as I moved out here, sending emails like all day long. And I wound up meeting with someone that worked at this production company, Abominable Pictures. And I met with him. He was actually like a script coordinator or something. And he was like, yeah, we're actually about to start filming Burning Love seasons 2 and 3, and they need like an assistant. It would be an unpaid internship. And he was like, yeah, you'd be these June Diane Raphael and Ken Marino's assistant, and Erika Oyama, who created the series. And I was like, yeah, I'll do it. I was like, it's weird. They're just taking someone off the street to be their assistant, but of course I'll do it. And it was like a month-long thing where I was on set every day and long hours, but it was just such a great experience. And my first time like on a real set and being around all these like funny people, like Nick Kroll, Paul Scheer, like everyone. And then after that, June was like, hey, do you want to continue being my like personal assistant and sort of like ad hoc when I have different errands like dry cleaning or like reading over a script, because she's also a writer. So I wound up being, and she's married to Paul Scheer, so I wound up being their assistants, personal assistants, for at least 2 years. So I was doing that. And at the time, I also had gotten a job as like a online producer for ABC Family. So I was doing all of like their blogs and stuff for like Pretty Little Liars. And I was like, it's just getting me closer to, I wasn't in like a writer's room, but I was like, oh, I'm getting close. I mean, it's farther away, or it's closer than finance. So I was like, oh, it's something. Then they sort of had like layoffs like a year into while I was there. So I was predominantly just June and Paul's assistant. And then when June and her writing partner, Casey Wilson, got a pilot order for their show, The Mason Twins, I was like their like showrunner assistant on that, which just taught me like, on the network side and big budget, like how it all happens. So that was my foray into that. And then when that didn't go, it was just a lot of like connections. So when that didn't go, Casey Wilson's husband at the time was doing Marry Me, which had gotten a season order, and she was on that. And she was like, yeah, you can work on that. And I wound up being the writer's PA for that. And that, I mean, I think that was such an invaluable experience and such great networking, because as a writer's PA, I mean, it's not a glamorous job, but you're just like getting lunches and coffees for all the writers, and you're like stocking up the kitchen and whatever they want. Like if someone wants like, I'd go on like random biscuit runs, or like someone wants pie. So I'd, go and get that. But you're just in the writer's room and you're with all these writers. And if you have a really nice showrunner, and David Kask was such a nice showrunner, and he was like, whenever you're not running errands or getting lunch or whatever, you can sit in the room and feel free to pitch. And at the time I was like so scared to pitch. I think I pitched like a few times, like jokes or story ideas, but it was just such a great environment to see how like you break a season and all the episodes, and the documents that all the writers write, and the outlines, and how it goes into script and table reads, and even being on set sometimes. So that was just such an invaluable experience. I think it's unfortunate because right now, since everything's Zoom, we're not having writers PA, but once we go back to in person, I think that is like the best way to start out, is to, be a writer's PA. It's a sucky job, but there's so much great experience there.
Yeah, it seems like such a good crash course. Is there
Yeah.
anything that you learned as a PA or assistant or showrunner's assistant that you now apply as a higher level writer in these rooms?
I think as a writer's PA, I was for a while, I was also a showrunner's assistant, which is, you're sort of the same as a writer's PA, but you don't have to get everyone lunches. You're just an assistant and you're basically just helping the showrunner. So you're like working with his or her schedules and doing all of that. And again, if they're a nice showrunner, they can be like, just sit in the room and you can pitch and soak it all in. I think it helped me a lot going into my first staff job because there's such a weird balance of like being the staff writer and you're the lowest on the totem pole and you're usually the youngest. And it's just like knowing when to speak, knowing when to not speak, knowing when to, say that there's an issue with a story and not throw a wrench in what the upper level writers are doing. It's just such a fine balance. And the writer's PA job, I think, really helped me learn that and just see it for myself. And, you saw good staff writers and the ones that they didn't necessarily love and the things they did that weren't great. And you learn not to do that. Because as a staff writer, you don't want to be the person that is just completely changing the story that the upper level writers are working on. You don't want to be like, well, here's the problem and why we shouldn't do this, unless
Right.
there truly is like a glaring problem for whatever reason, but you don't want to be the person that's like just knowing everything. So it's just realizing you're there to add on and have great jokes. And so that was really great to have that experience as a writer's PA and showrunner's assistant to see that firsthand.
Yeah, it sounds like you could be the best kind of fly on the wall observing all of these things. And then also you're bringing everyone coffee, so they just love you. So
Yeah.
the right way to go. Can you talk a little bit about your transition from assistant to staff writer and how you navigated that? It's a big hurdle. So how did you manage that transition?
I think, while I was an assistant, I was able to get an agent and a manager, and that was so helpful. And I went on a bunch of meetings before I finally landed my staff writer position. But once I finally got it, I mean, it's so nice because the WGA also does like a staff writer boot camp where it's a bunch of like producer level writers on a panel, and they're sort of telling you also what to expect as a staff writer and like how to navigate it. So that was really helpful. And, my first day, that showrunner on my first show, Living Biblically, it was so nice. His name was Patrick Walsh, and he was just like, I hired you for a reason. I want to hear your voice. Like, don't be afraid to pitch stories and jokes. And, everyone here is like an equal almost. So we're all here to just make the best show that we possibly can. So that was really nice and such an inviting environment. And all the writers were so nice and supportive. So that was really helpful because that's not always the case. So that just made it such an easy transition. And I think also the things that I learned as a writer's PA and showrunner's assistant of just like, not to throw a wrench in stories, but to add on and to, just pitch things that help the story that we're working on. And, coming in every day prepared, coming in early, having jokes, prepared when you can with a script. And another thing of just like not getting in your head or upset if like something you pitch doesn't make it. It's just rolling with the punches and just keep going. Eventually you'll get something in there. I think those are all things that really helped me as a staff writer. And just being, I don't know, friendly, nice. Yeah. You just don't want to be the person that's, I don't know, curmudgeon or something. Yeah.
Right. Being someone that people want to spend all day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit just about what a typical day in a writer's room is like, and be as specific as you want, but just like once you get there, what is a typical day like?
I can, like before COVID, I'll talk about that because that's hopefully what we're going back to. Everyone just like gets in the room and there's a lot of hanging out in the room and chit-chatting and laughing. I think we spent at least the first like 30 minutes just like laughing it up, deciding what we're going to order for lunch. And then once we do that, we finally get into it. And, you know, depending where you are in the season and how big the room is, sometimes all the writers are in one room and sometimes the showrunner will split rooms. And, you know, you'll have some writers working on, you know, episode 3 while the other room's working on episode 4. But yeah, it's like, you know, in the beginning of a room, the first few weeks, they call it like blue skying, where you're just like talking about general ideas of where you see like episodes going, like people sharing stories about their life of like, what if we saw characters do this or that? And we talk about like the character arcs and where we want like our main characters to start and end and some of the things we want them to go through. And I think once we've sort of mapped out this season in terms of like at least half the season or all this episodes, depending on like the episode order, you know, I've been on shows where it's mostly 10 to 12 episodes. So you can sort of map out where you see the season going. And then from there, we'll start, you know, diving into each episode and getting more detailed and seeing like where the beats go. And, you know, when you're all in a room together, the writer's assistant is like taking notes, and usually it's on like a bigger screen, and we're just all pitching ideas of, you know, different story beats of where the episode will take us. And then once you've done that and it's assigned to the writer will go off and write like a story doc where it's pretty much like a page to 2-page document that's just a summary of, you know, the A, B, and C stories and the stories that all the characters go through. And then they send that off to like producers and studio and network, and you get notes on that. And then from there, the writer will go off and write the outline, which is just a more detailed document of, you know, every scene and what happens in each scene. And usually before the writer goes off to outline, all the writers will come together to sort of figure out all the scenes together. It's such a collaborative thing, especially in a comedy room where all the writers are working together to figure out the story and all the scenes, and people are pitching jokes that you can then put in the script. So yeah, once the writer has gone off and written the outline, and usually on most rooms, they'll give you about like 2 days to write the outline. Then you come back and you get notes from the writers, this producer, studio, network, and then you go off and you write the script and sort of go through that process. Usually have like a week from the room where you don't have to come physically go into the room, and you get to write your episode and come back and get notes from the writers and studio, make changes and all that. And yeah, then table read, depending on the show. I mean, I've been on some shows where we just write all the episodes, and we don't do table reads till like when we're maybe farther down the line, we're about to start shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was such a helpful overview.
Yeah.
I've got a couple more questions for 5 or 10 more minutes, but to anyone watching, if you have any questions so far, feel free to write them in the chat, because after this part of the Q&A is done, we'll open it up to audience questions. So since you've worked on so many different shows, I wanted to ask if you had a favorite or a favorite way the room was set up, anything that you have looked back on as like, that was my best experience as a writer so far.
I love the first show I was on, Living Biblically. It was a multicam show, and that was so much fun because and it was such like a nice like camaraderie between all of us, where we like ate lunch together. And the fun thing about a multicam show is that every Friday we had a tape night, where that's when we filmed the episode in front of a studio audience. And it just felt, there was so much like adrenaline on that day, because, you know, based on the reaction of the audience, if they don't laugh at a joke that we've already written, you know, we all come together and we figure out a better joke, and everyone's pitching their joke. And, you know, you pitch it to the showrunner and he sort of decides like which joke will make it. And it was just fun, because I've been on so many shows. I think a lot of like the cable or streaming shows, they tape like way after the room has ended, where this one was nice because like while we were writing, we were taping, and I don't know, it was just like a fun atmosphere and adrenaline. I felt like tape night felt like game night in a way. if you're like an athlete. But I also really liked Little Voice. It was a different experience because I think it was a bit more of like a drama type of room than a comedy room. And that was nice because it was also in New York. So I got to go back to New York City for like a few months. But it was different in that, you know, we met for maybe the first 4 weeks and talked about the episodes and the stories. And then the other 8 weeks, we were sort of like working on our own, and we just meet up with the showrunner and discuss our own thing. It just felt like a different thing where comedy rooms are so collaborative and you're there every day with all the writers and working together on everything, where this felt more just like personal between just you and the showrunner. And then I've loved the room I'm in now. I mean, even though it's a Zoom room and that's annoying, but it's just with like really great writers, and the showrunner is someone that I love and I've worked with before. And in my mind, I think we're best friends, but I'm sure she's like, what? But yeah, working with her and like other people that I've gotten to work with before. So it's just such a fun room, even though it's on Zoom, but we're just like laughing and having so much fun. And it's such a silly show, Cone High. But there's also some social commentary in there too that, I don't know, it's just so fun. So I think those would be my top 3 rooms. Yeah.
So since you've worked on multicam, comedies, dramas, how have you been able to navigate all those different genres? Because it seems like sometimes writers can get pigeonholed in comedy versus drama, but you haven't been pigeonholed. So how have you managed that?
I think, you know, yeah, it's a great question. I think like my primary thing is comedy.
Mhm.
And I think it's like, I guess the difference is, I guess like Little Voice was considered a dramedy. But I guess it's just going from like dramedy to like hard hitting comedies. And I think, you know, I mean, I like them both. So it's like, and I guess it's just like some of the personal things I write can tend to be sometimes dramedy-ish because I'm writing from such a personal space, and you know, sometimes life sucks. So like you write like the drama of it all too can sort of be funny. So yeah, I think I just sort of I gravitate towards like, I guess, hard-hitting comedies or like dramedies. I think, yeah. And sometimes in the dramedy rooms, they do want more of like a hard-hitting comedy person to make sure that they are getting some of that humor and that humor in there. So yeah, I think those are my the genres that I sort of gear towards, and I watch as well. So yeah.
Great. Well, we've got a lot of questions coming in, so I'm going to start the audience part of the Q&A.
Okay.
We actually had a few pre-submitted questions, so I can start those. Oh, we have a lot of questions. Great. So
Nice.
Here's one. So this was a pre-submitted question. So what advice do you have for those who have just discovered writing, like within the past year, and are not sure if they want to make the jump?
Oh, wow. I think just like continuing to write, taking classes, reaching out to writers right now that are working, and even if you can, reaching out to like people that are writers assistants or script coordinators, just to know like what that entry point is like. Yeah, I think just talking to as many people as possible and understanding the industry and the business and, you know, the journey of a writer, because it's such a volatile industry that, you know, it is quite a leap to make it, you know. So I think talking to as many people and just keep writing, submitting for stuff, like submitting to festivals and, you know, maybe getting noticed in that way. Or if you're into it, creating your own stuff, if you want to do like a short or a web series. Yeah, I think just practicing and getting as much information and talking to people as much as possible and building relationships too. When you reach out to people, keeping that relationship going, because you just never know. If you finally do make the leap, then you're like, oh, I knew this person. And maybe if they know of an assistant job, they'll think of me or keep me in mind. So yeah.
Right. That's actually a good segue into Josh's question, which was, what's the best way to spend your time as an assistant when you're not doing your assistant work?
I would say, yeah, I think writing. I mean, I hate to sound so like cliche, but yeah, just spending time like writing. And if you can take classes, I know it's hard to navigate because some classes aren't great or they're just like so expensive, but even just watching like the master class online, like I'm getting into the feature world and I've sort of been watching the master class things because they're, I mean, they're taught by real people that are so successful. But I think, just writing as much as possible and, just honing the craft. And I think it is true that with each script and each idea, you do get better, and making sure that you're allowing other people to read your work and open to notes. I know it's so hard because it's like your baby and it can be very personal, but just making sure you're receptive to notes and just constantly getting better, and like making sure when you are like in a room as an assistant, you are just like soaking up everything that the writers are doing and just really learning, and also networking. I think a lot of jobs are based on like who you know and connections. So making sure like if you are in a room and there's certain writers that you gravitate towards, like once the room wraps, like asking if they want to meet for a coffee or, just keeping those relationships going because they're so important.
Mhm.
But yeah.
Definitely. A question from Rodney. Have you had any challenges being the only Black female in the room? Did you think that the push for including diverse voices is moving in the right direction right now?
I'm trying to think. I mean, I haven't had any overt. I mean, I think there was a tiny thing in one room that I was in where it was a bit weird, but thankfully I wasn't the only woman of color. It was a few of us, and that was a bit tricky, but I think the friendship that we built helped us to get through it, which was nice. But I haven't had anything else in other rooms that I felt like, I mean, sometimes it's hard being the only person of color and you feel like, am I supposed to speak for all Black people? Or sometimes I'm the only person of color, period. So it's like, am I supposed to speak for all people of color, like not even just Black people? So that's sometimes hard to have that weight on you and to make sure you call out everything and you're hyper aware of certain things. But I've been in rooms where, certain jokes or something rubbed me the wrong way. So I, had to make sure I was vocal about it. And every room I've been in, they've been very receptive of like, oh my God, thank you, because they weren't aware. So that's been, yeah. I'm sorry, there was a second part of the question. I don't know if I answered
Oh
it.
yeah. The second part of his question was, do you think that the push for including diverse voices is moving in the right direction?
I think so. I think so. I think just making sure that it's still like a qualified person and we're not just like plugging and playing people just to fulfill like a quota. But I think it's moving in the right direction. The room I'm in right now is the most diverse room I've been in. And it's like, we have a Black woman, we have a Latinx woman, a Native, an Asian, like it's the most diverse room I've been in, which is crazy. But yeah. But yeah, I think it's good. I think, especially when you have like a diverse cast or just you're telling a diverse story, it's great to have more than just the one Black girl in the room to speak for everything. So it's great. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a question from Ye. She's asking, have you found that the studio's notes usually focus on a certain element in the story? Do you find that their notes are focused on story or pacing, legal issues, and technical aspects? So just generally studio feedback is her question.
Yeah, I think sometimes it'll be like legal things, like you can't say certain things, like you have to go through like clearance. They'll sort of flag that. But usually the notes are sort of about like story, just making like, making sure that like every character is serviced, or like on the the only show I've really been on where there's been a lot of notes was Living Biblically. I think network shows tend to give more notes. And they are like, yeah, how do we, wrap it all up at the end and make it feel warm and fuzzy? And like, how do we make it that this person's like good at their job? And there's like notes like that where I think on the cable and streaming shows I've been on, they've been sort of like, this is great. Like they sort of give the creator a bit more creative license to sort of do what they want, and they're willing to go with the flow a bit more. And I think, yeah, the notes on network shows have really just been like, how do we wrap it up? What's the lesson that the characters learn at the end? It's more story focused. Maybe it's like pulling back where this joke might be a little too much. Can we make the joke softer, or like, can we add more jokes? It's more like story or like joke pitches or joke notes. Yeah.
And her follow-up question was, do you ever get wildly different feedback from producers in the room and the studio on the same script, where the two opinions are totally diverging?
Yeah, we have gotten that, where I think at that I have, where it's like, especially when there's like a lot of people in the mix, when it's like producer has notes, studio has notes, network has notes, you can sometimes get conflicting notes. And I think at that point, it's sort of up to the showrunner to sort of pick and choose where they're going to go and what services the story the best. And hopefully you have like a studio and network that allows the showrunner to do that. So yeah, yeah, we've definitely gotten conflicting notes where it's like, what do we choose? Yeah.
A question from Amy. Aside from classes and workshops, are there any books that you recommend that can help with educating people about what the writer's process is like and about creating content?
Yeah, I mean, on the feature side, I've been reading Save the Cat, which I think is like everyone recommends that. And then in terms of TV writing, I'm like looking over at my bookshelf to see what I've used. I can't think of any books off the top of my head, but I mean, classes, the master class. I can also send book recommendations after if that helps.
That would be
If
great.
anyone- Yeah. But yeah, I think right now on the feature side, Save the Cat has been very helpful. And I think everyone, it's like an industry standard almost that everyone talks about, the Save the Cat method, and yeah, that structure.
And it changes the way you watch every movie forever.
I know. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you listen to any podcasts about writing?
I don't. I'm not a podcast person. So yeah. The only one I listen to is Bitch Sesh about the Real Housewives.
Yeah. Highly recommend.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Amy had a second question, which was, do you find that there is much more opportunity now for writers because of the increased amount of content being made on more networks?
Yeah, absolutely. There's like so many shows being produced on all these different platforms. So I think it allows for more opportunities. I mean, I think in a way the network structured, like they always sort of had a staff writer position. Sometimes in the cable or streaming, that's not always guaranteed as a way to break in, is that they have that staff writer role. And some of those rooms can be smaller. Like I've been in rooms where it's like 4 writers versus like those network shows, which I think, that number is decreasing. But, on average, they'd have rooms with like 12 to 13 people. So the room size has got, even though there's more content, the room sizes have gotten smaller because those budgets are smaller. But yeah, I think that's why it's so important to just keep relationships going, because it's like the great way to get in. Yeah.
Definitely. You mentioned when you were an assistant, you managed to find representation. Can you talk about your process for finding an agent and manager?
Yeah, I mean, initially, the web series we did a second season, and we were in like more festivals. We did like Just for Laughs and ABFF. So I know that we met with some like managers and agents, but that never came to fruition. But then my this entertainment lawyer I knew that I actually grew up with, we used to dance together. She is an entertainment lawyer out here, and she was like, send me your script. There's an agent at Gersh that's like really looking for new diverse voices. So I sent her my script and I met with him, and yeah, we sort of clicked, and he's sort of been like my main agent since. And then my manager, when I was an executive or a showrunner's assistant on Imaginary Mary, it was a bunch of writers that were from Chicago, And it was around the time when the Cubs were in the World Series, and after work, they were all going to this one bar to watch the World Series. So I was like, I don't like baseball and I'm not from Chicago, but I'll go because it's just like a great way to network and just get more time with the writers. And one of the writers, her sister is a manager at the time it was Principado Young, but now it's Artist First. And she was there too, because she's also from Chicago. And all the writers were like, you know, you gotta meet with her. She's so great. And she was like, yes, definitely. And I sort of like held her to it and followed up on it. And we met, and yeah, and she's been my manager since. So yeah.
Cool. There were a few more questions that came in that were pre-submitted. I just wanted to make sure we got to everyone's questions who's here. But feel free to keep typing questions in the chat, anyone who's attending. But what was the most challenging part about making the transition to your writing career?
I think the uncertainty of it all. I mean, you come from just such a secure job in finance and the type of finance I was doing was like, they called it like where people would retire. So sometimes it's like such a secure place, and the security of that, and then switching to something that is so volatile and something that I didn't really know how it all worked. I think it was like such a learning curve of like knowing what are all the different positions that are available, that you can be a writer's PA and a writer's assistant. Like I didn't know that. That was hard. And I think just that breaking in point of just how do I get my foot in the door, and constantly, you know, meeting with people and the hoping and sort of getting let down, just adjusting your bar and your standard, I guess, I don't know, and your expectations, and just understanding that the career isn't very secure. It's very volatile. So it's like, and it's very gig based. So you're on something for 12 weeks and then you're without a job. And then hopefully you get on something again that's, you know, 20 weeks and then you're without a job. So just like understanding that and managing your money, but as an assistant, not a lot to manage, but yeah, I guess just understanding the business and knowing that, because I had no idea really. I didn't really understand that. But yeah.
I feel like if there's anything the past year has taught us, it's that uncertainty is scary.
Yeah, I know, yeah. Yeah.
That makes total sense.
I know.
Rodney had another question. What are your career goals going forward? Features, showrunner, production company?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to, you know, sell my own show and, you know, be a showrunner in that regard. I'd love to sell a feature. It's a goal. I mean, I'd love to get a deal at a studio, those are some of my main goals. Basically just live the life of Shonda Rhimes, I guess.
Yeah. Her masterclass is pretty great.
I know, yeah.
What kind of in-between jobs have you seen writers take between writing gigs? Some do copywriting, teach writing courses. Are there any other common threads you've seen?
Yeah, I've had in between, but mine, I was like a nanny for a while in between jobs. What else? I mean, unemployment becomes your very good friend when you're in between jobs. But yeah, I know some people that have done copywriting and like sort of advertising. They'll do like blog writing. I know a lot of writers that were like, yeah, I used to, you know, do blog writing for Huffington Post and do like Vice articles and stuff like that. So I know just keeping in the train of just like writing, yeah, copywriting, blog writing, if you can get that. Some people I know have done, like worked on like Pluto, that streaming, where like she was able to work from home and it allowed her the flexibility. But yeah, I mean, or like assistant work if you can, like personal assisting. I would take sort of like ad hoc jobs from writers that were like, yeah, can you know, run these errands for me for this like brief amount of time? So I would take it on and yeah, just get my hands on whatever I could. But yeah.
I do a lot of dog sitting as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a few more minutes, but I'm curious if there's any show throughout history, current, past, canceled, anything that you would have loved to write on.
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, 30 Rock is sticking out in my head, or The Office, because they were just so funny, and yeah, and probably just like they were all like 22 episode shows, so the money and the stability would have been great. But The Office, I think, is just so funny, and I think just went for such hard-hitting jokes that I would have loved to have written on that, I think. Yeah.
And the way
Would've
it's
been fun.
just maintained its popularity through
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like younger cousins get into it when they turn like 12 or 13, and then they think they're introducing it to me, and I'm like, no,
No.
it's been
Yeah.
around, but it
Yeah.
can really just last through time.
Yeah. Or Arrested Development.
Oh
That
yeah,
show's hilarious. I would have loved to have written on that. Yeah. Yeah.
great. Well, we've also got, oh, Amy would love if you'd be able to share any book recommendations after this. I'm sure everyone would
Yeah.
be grateful for that, but
Yeah.
sounds like everyone's gotten a chance to ask their questions. Definitely feel free to type any other questions you have in the chat. But thank you so much, Jessica, for your time. This has been so informative and so helpful.
Thank you so much. And I think I'm on the alumni network or on Facebook if anyone has any other questions or advice or whatever. Yeah. Or if they need advice. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much. I'll just officially say thank you everyone for attending today's speaker series. The recording of this event will be available on the UVA Club's Global Engagement YouTube channel in a few days. And thank you, Jessica, for your time and for sharing all your wisdom with us. We really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much, guys.
All right. Stay safe,
Bye.
everyone.